You're listening to the Craft Messages That Matter podcast. I'm your host, Theo Capodistrius. Grab a coffee, sit back, and enjoy today's episode. Hey, how you doing? I'm really excited you're back for season 2 of the Craft Messages That Matter podcast. I'm looking forward to improving how I deliver, how I edit, the content I provide, and to make this the most relevant and insightful podcast for your public speaking, communication, and presentation journey. So I'm really thankful you're back to enjoy season 2, and I know we're going to have fun along the way. So please like, follow, share, and tell your friends about this podcast so I can get it into more people's earballs. Is that a word? Whatever. Anyway, in this episode, I want to talk to you about presentations and how in 2023 we should no longer be exposed to boring presentations. You might be thinking, what is a boring presentation? Well, I want you to think back to a time, perhaps it was school, university, or maybe even at work, where you've had to sit through and listen to someone talk at you for ages. You don't actually know what they were talking about, but it was really painful. You can imagine it now, right? Someone standing in front of the room, or maybe it was even on Zoom. A never-ending slide deck filled with reams and reams of text, all in black and white, all in Times New Roman. And you're confused why you're even there in the first place because the presenter is just reading. They're just reading off the slides. That person thought it was necessary for me to sit there and listen to them read? Why didn't they just make a podcast or record this and send it to me like through an audio file? We've all been there, right? We know what we're talking about. So I'm making a stand to say that boring presentations should end now. I'm going to share with you some key tips you can implement into your presentations to make them a bit more fun, a little more engaging, and less likely to induce your audience into a coma. So the first thing, less words and more pictures. If you're like me, if you see slides with a heap of text on them, you're probably going to stop listening and write some stuff down. Our brains actually read faster than their ability to listen. We're really bad at multitasking. I mean, I am, but some people, and a lot of people, are really bad at multitasking. So you can't expect your audience to do both at the same time. The solution then is to use less words. You don't need to write down every single point that you want to speak on a PowerPoint slide. You can use a big word that captures the main point you want to capture, or maybe it's a statistic. So for example, when I talk to people about public speaking skills, I'll have this slide that has a big 85 on it, and that then represents the percentage that 85% of people are sometimes afraid of public speaking. I didn't need to write the whole thing on a slide for anyone to read, but I could have the numbers 85% on there because that actually sparks my memory and 2, illustrates the point a lot better. But speaking of illustrating your point, another thing you can use is images. And of course, an image can say 1,000 words. The benefit of images is that you can use a heap of pictures to show your audience what you're talking about in a visual way, and it actually helps you to remember what you're saying. So you'll associate the point you're talking about with the image, and then it'll also improve your delivery, so it'll help you remember. How good! Number 2 is interactive elements. Are there any interactive elements you can include to make your presentation feel a little more engaging? Have you considered asking a live polling question where your audience need to answer a question on their phones through an app, or maybe you're presenting on Zoom and you can use the poll function there? Or maybe it's simple as asking the audience, raise your hands if, and then you ask the question. This way you're making the audience feel a part of the presentation and they'll become a little bit more invested in what you have to say. And that's only going to be a good thing to make sure you can maintain their attention. And the third point, don't read directly. It is completely fine to use notes. Most people do it for any presentation. And if you've ever seen an unedited TED Talk, yes, I'm talking about the talks on the big TED stage in Toronto where people pay $10,000 a ticket. The speakers often need to go and get a glass of water halfway through their talk, which is actually code for them for forgetting their words and going back to read their notes. Yeah, those parts are edited out. And that's okay. Because one thing that is incredibly painful is someone who just stands there and reads at you. As we spoke about at the beginning of this episode, if you're going to just read at me, why didn't you just send me an email with those notes in it? I didn't need to be exposed to you reading to me. Instead, give yourself the key points that you want to make in the presentation and a few dot points on some paper that you want to discuss underneath. This will of course come with plenty of preparation, so you've practiced, you know the main points you want to say, and you know the dot points that will spark your memory for the things you want to discuss. You may also have some of those visual slides handy that will help spark your memory, like we mentioned before. Having an image that talks about a particular thing, you know what you're going to talk about when you see it. But one thing I'd love you to do moving forward, if you have to sit through a boring presentation soon, keep a separate set of notes about why you didn't like it. You might find that they aren't doing some of the things that we mentioned in this episode, but it could be a whole heap of other reasons. Whatever it is, each time you watch someone present, we can learn something. And I'm not just talking about the content. So take it as a learning experience every time you're exposed to one of those deadly lectures. For more on some kick-ass presentation techniques, I have created the Ultimate Presentation Guide as a free download on my website, and I'll share the link in the show notes. If you like this episode, please follow or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast and give it a rating. 5 stars would be greatly appreciated, as I'm in the early stages and I'd love the support to help get it into the algorithm and get it into people's ears. To learn more about what I do as a speaker, trainer, MC, and public speaking communication and presentation coach, head to my website, www.theocap.com.au. Follow the Craft Messages That Matter Instagram page at CMTM_podcast, and please follow me at my personal Instagram page, TheoCap88. Bye for now.